Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for joining us for Thrive Talks. We are just going to wait a minute because lots of people in the waiting room has joined. I'll say hello to Rahul till then. Hi, Rahul. Thank you so much for taking the time out. How have you been?
I've been as good as we can be during this time, but you will see me smiling for a positive future. So, but yes, doing okay.
No, I think we've all been there, but the last week or so just feels like things are starting to look up. And I think as entrepreneurs, our default optimism is going to be back at play, and hopefully we'll start feeling better. And there's no other option but to sort of, in that sense, keep going. I'll just wait for, let me just check how many people are there, and then we can get started in a minute or so. Okay. I'll start exactly at 4:02. So you're still working from home, right, Rahul?
Yes. Looking forward to getting back.
I know. I think it seemed much tougher this time around than it did when we worked for 11 months from home, then got a taste back for a month and a half. We started office on Feb 15th and then shut again on April 1. But those 6 weeks were good, and I found it much tougher this time to adjust to work from home than the last year.
Last year, I think you felt there was no other option. And because it was a little bit more government induced, I think you were kind of in a different spot. I think this year, thankfully, between the time we opened up and the time we had to shut it back, I think we at least have few glimpses of positive things. So we were able to do a little bit of a dinner among team members and some of those nice things which we were missing for 10, 11 months. So I'm glad at least we opened for a little bit before closing down.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with you.
So, but yeah, I think looking forward to reopening again, hopefully pretty soon.
Hopefully in a couple of weeks. Okay, let's get started, Rahul. We'll get started. Welcome everyone to Thrive Talks. I'm Shreyasi Singh, the founder and CEO of Harappa Education. Harappa Education, as you know, is an online learning institution where we bring a curriculum which is based on Thrive skills and therefore Thrive Talks. And Thrive skills are essentially a set of cognitive, social, and behavioral skills, which we feel are very, very critical for the success of professional success of individuals, the individual's personal growth, as well as for the success and effectiveness of teams and organizations. Thrive Talks is our initiative to bring together interesting talent custodians, CEOs, CHROs, and heads of L&D to this forum fortnightly on Thursdays on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. to have this conversation. I'm delighted to have Rahul Garg join us. Rahul is obviously the founder and CEO of Moglix, one of our newly minted unicorns. So congratulations to him on that. As an entrepreneur, I can only imagine the sense of success and triumph that he must feel. Moglix is a very interesting company. It's one of Asia's largest B2B e-commerce companies. And they essentially want to transform industrial distribution in India for the manufacturing sector using a technology first approach. Rahul is a true technologist at heart. I think he holds 16 US patents in product management and technology, and he crosses all the tick boxes of being the perfect new age Indian tech entrepreneur. He studied in IIT Kanpur and ISB and has also been a Fortune 40 under 40 leader. So Rahul and I have known each other a little bit through the last 3 or 4 years. So it's been wonderful for us to watch his journey and for his to watch mine and Harappa's. And it's actually meeting entrepreneurs like him that made me do what I'm doing. So doubly thank you, Rahul, and welcome to Thrive Talks.
No, thanks a lot for having us. And I think it's been, very, very kind intro. I think the sweetest part which I liked was you watching us, inspiring you to become an entrepreneur. I think that's the best thing. And hopefully for an entrepreneur, that's very fulfilling if people are able to take something away from our journey and which impacts their own life and probably several others' lives in future. So I'm glad to be on the show.
Great. At Tribe Talks, what we do essentially, obviously the main overarching theme of the session today is on scaling talent. We're calling it the unicorn. It's called scaling talent for high growth. And the format that we follow is we essentially have broken the next 55 minutes into 3 themes. And those themes being first of sort of discovering people, product market fit, and entrepreneur core team fit. Then second, the art and science of motivation, retention, and growth. And lastly, education's role in scaling talent. And the way that we work, because we'd like to get, and we've already got questions from a pre-registered audience, and several of them very fascinating ones. We stop after every 10, 12 minutes and take questions from the audience through the session rather than waiting for Q&A right at the end, so that we can get some much more real discussions in. But let me jump right into our first theme, which is essentially discovering people, product market fit, and this entrepreneur coaching fit. But even before I ask you that, Rahul, tell us, even before we get to know how to scale talent, let's start with how the entrepreneur scales himself and herself first. How have you grown in the last 5-6 years to now become a unicorn CEO?
So I think the journey starts with your quest or desire to grow. Because I think if you are the type of person who say that I know it all kind of a person, probably you will have a lot of blind spots in terms of unaware areas where you can learn and grow yourself. And I am I would say, extreme believer in learning and improvising every single day. And I think, so my hunger for learning, I think is pretty high. And to the extent, I believe, having done 2 degrees, and I sort of skipped from doing any PhDs and other things, but I believe in this decade of my sort of the 40s, I believe I will take one more formal education and learn more structurally. So I think that quest for learning, quest for knowing what you want to know, I think is a very, very important thing. And then I think as you grow as an individual, I think it is one of those points that you have to learn that there are certain skills that you will have. A smart person can possibly go around acquiring all the skills in the world, but it's just not possible that easily. So you have to start augmenting people with skills. You have to start augmenting yourself with people around you who may want to do a certain facet of the organization more than you want to do, because every day when you wake up, I mean, you have to do product, you have to do engineering, you have to do sales, business development, marketing, finance, HR, all of those. And invariably, while I think as an entrepreneur, you have chosen a life where you have to learn some bit of all of those traits and learn about the customer, supplier, and investor, and all other stakeholders. You will invariably realize that there are some things where you want to spend more time and you're possibly good at it. And there are some areas where you can become good at it, but you'll spend a lot more time. So I think, how do you complement yourself and continue to learn in the areas you want to learn? I think, so I would say my growth is pretty much surround myself with people who can complement myself, and I'll become better and better at things that I can do myself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. But tell me, if you look back on the 5 years, tell me the strengths that you had, like an inherent, innate strength that you've always had, that has really become amplified, and you think Moglix has really been benefited from you contributing that strength. And tell me a strength that you did have that has actually now become a strength because of these last 5 years.
So one thing maybe, and that's pre-Moglix as well, I mean, for last 20, 25 years, I believe that alternate to hard work is yet to be found. And somewhere I use this because I believe a persistent hard work can beat many competition or other things over a period of time, because eventually the outcome is a multiplicative of time and the effort that you're putting into things. So I think that's definitely one of my strengths. Second, I think the strength which has been there in the upbringing and so on and so forth has been the quest for excellence and the quest for sort of during the journey being upfront and being straight around it. I think these continue to be somewhat my strengths, or something that I just do it as a habit. I mean, I don't have to think about them or every day. I mean, it's just who I am. If I think about areas where I could, I believe that I should continue to compliment people. I look at areas, I mean, finance is not, I mean, I learned as a B school graduate finance, but many a times in my life, I've despised banks and other things. So I think that's clearly an area where I continue to augment myself with people. There are people who are better probably at supply chain or certain facets of the organization, or even HR. I mean, I believe I'm a reasonably decent leader, but I think when it comes to scale thinking as people, operations, and the entire spectrum of talent from a 21-year-old to a 48-year-old, I think there are people who can definitely do a job much better than I can. So I think I think so. If you say from the things that I have grown is this appreciation for people having diversity of skills and competencies, which when combined with yours can actually do wonders.
I think that's a great thing to learn. And the fact that you're here having conversations like this means that you're obviously committed to getting into the people side much more. But you said something that is really important. I do think that in founder-led companies, our companies get the best of us and the worst of us, right? Like we imbue, there's some genetics at work, certainly. And I think the point that you also made about finding people who complement your strengths. Tell me, how critical is that? When a company grows the way that Moglis has grown, I mean, in just 5 years, what we managed to achieve is how important is for a certain set of core people to be able to learn which is the best in you, and then also be able to minimize the damage that you can do from your worst, or actually in a much more positive light, complement what you might not have. So this whole thing about the entrepreneur core team sync, right? How critical do you think that is?
So we use, I think, consistently one picture as in many of our all hands. Okay, that picture is from the Onam boat race. Okay, so we talk about it a lot. Right people, right position, rowing in the right direction as fast as possible. Right. So I think, and we always talk about it because we think that only when you get the right people working in tandem, you can really win the race. And sometimes, by the way, winning the race is not necessarily winning against someone else, because you might be setting your own benchmarks or aspiring your own goals, right? But if you really want to go fast, so that is a core philosophy for us, that somebody who can sort of do one job may not necessarily do the best job in some other field or some other geography even sometimes, right? So, and I think that sync is important because and we see it in our professional lives quite often, right? I mean, like it's not necessarily only relevant for startup, but there are people, the equal talented people sometimes, who can work together very well to produce a phenomenal outcome. And there are people equally talented working poorly to produce a sub-quality output. And that is why I think that sync is important, because eventually all of us are trying to do more in the day. Now, more in the day is only possible that if you have a 5-minute conversation, you can articulate, the other person is able to grasp and start running, versus if you have to spend like 1 hour or multiple iterations of that dialogue, right? And that's where the time loss happens. And many a times as an entrepreneur or as teams, we may not realize, but productivity of a senior team has a compound effect on the organization. And therefore, all of us have to be like super, super cautious and conscious of anything that can steal away that productivity, because it will be impacting the entire organization.
So I think you said 3 or 4 very important things that I want to recap for the audience. One, I think that imagery you painted of the Onam boat race and your 4 R's: right role. What did you say? Right role, right
people,
direction, right people, right role, right direction at the right speed.
Yes.
So the 4 R's of the right role, speed, direction, and the person, right? And we
Yeah.
in an earlier, and so that's, I think, a really, really important takeaway. And then second, of course, is the disproportionate impact senior leaders have on the running of the company, right? And constantly tracking that. You know, in our earlier conversation, once we were having this discussion about, and I love the phrase you use about people, product, market fit. Is that what you meant by this right role? That don't expect everyone to do everything, which is also a question that's coming from the audience, to say that in startups, especially, people say, hey, just hire generally smart people and they learn to do everything. Your philosophy, when you think about the people, product, market fit, even in a startup, seems to be that no, you have to find the right person for the right task. So how do you reconcile those things about a generally smart person being able to do anything and or be precise in the role mapping?
So I think there are three elements to it. Okay, so one thing is, most smart people, I think when they put their mind together, their heart together, effort together, they can probably do 70% quality of most tasks. Okay. Now there is a thin line between when you are a generalist versus a specialist. And when you're doing it only for a week or 2 weeks versus you have to do it over several years. Now, as the organization grows, you need people who really want to do a certain set of tasks for next several years. And they will go from 70 to 80, 80 to 85, 90, 95, 97, 99, 99.5, so on and so forth. And excellence cannot be necessarily achieved by generalists when you start to compete at large scale. Right. So I ran Google search, all new product launches for a year. And I remember for many of us, Google search was probably done in 2001. And you see, come across a lot of product managers after the first product is launched. They said like, I'm going to use a little bit of Hindi. Hopefully the audience doesn't mind it. So, अब तो product बन गया, अब तो maintenance है. Right. And we have
so
all
wrong.
heard this, we have heard all these phrases, right? But if you really look at it, the battle of Google search product actually started after 2001, because you will have to beat Yahoo. You'll have to make sure that MSN, Microsoft doesn't threaten you. You have to think about how does it compete with Facebook, or how does it change when people start to use more of mobile or mobile app and all of those, right? So actually, as an organization, when you start to go from this 70% to 80, 85%, 90, 95%, people have to really be passionate about becoming very, very good at particular things. And I think that is where, if you, for example, the guy who runs my customer success, he'll like wake up at 12 in the night and he's like, if the customer delivery has not happened, I want to make it happen in next 30 minutes. And he'll be super passionate about that. Right. And if I give my product manager that problem, I think he will quit in probably 2 weeks. Right. So you have to be passionate about what you do and willing to go to the excellence 99.9. And that's where I think the right person doing the right role over a period of time is what leads to excellence as an organization combined.
I think that's a really important point. You said most smart people can do most things to a above average level of proficiency if they put the mind to it, and especially in grunt situations or for a particular phase. But for true consistent excellence, especially as for scaling talent or scaling companies, you do need to have people who are passionate about doing it and are good at it and don't mind doing it for 5 years, 10 years, 11 years, find it fascinating enough, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a really good point. Tell me at Moglix, and then I'll jump right. This is the last question I'll ask, and then we'll jump to all of the audience questions that are here. At Moglix specifically, who are the kind of people you've constantly seen being successful? And I'm very curious to know, what are your mental models for hiring, and how do you try and spot people who you think can be excellent, passionate, and really in particular roles, right? And how do you have an interview question that you kind of check for? Because there's so many questions around how do you discover that fit, because of attrition, bad role fit, we've all seen across startups. It's really tough to get the right person for the right role in the right company at the right time. There are many things that can go wrong.
So there are 3-4 things which I do, and sometimes actually most people do not think those as important interview questions.
Tell me, I'm interested.
So if you look at it, the first question that you asked me about, I think awareness about self is a very, very important thing. So I tend to a lot of times ask people, what do you think are your strengths and weakness? And then I also ask them, why do you think this is your strength and how did you demonstrate? What is your weakness? How did you demonstrate? And why that is very, very important is because only your awareness drives your passion towards improvisation, learning, so on and so forth. And this sounds like one of those lame questions people ask in the end, right? Because this does not seem to test the skill set that they would have learned in Java, or they would have cracked the new algorithm. But I find this is very, very important question, and that self-awareness, because your self-awareness drives your learning. And normally, by the way, I get 99% of the time I get average answers for this. Okay.
Oh, yeah, people. So many interviews are so average. That's such sad part.
But this question, because most people do not think this is an important question in an interview. The second thing, I tend to skew towards talent versus skills. Okay. So given, I would say talent +1 and skill -1, I'll go for talent +1, +1 and skill -1. Because I think
how do you differentiate between talent and skill?
I think it's it generally is a test more of aptitude and learnability, because a good talent can learn things faster, and we are constantly learning. So I believe skills can be acquired. And I mean, like, we will always have this unique business problems that we are solving that the person may not have encountered. So his ability to learn, and learn is about talent and hunger. So awareness and talent combined together actually become very, very powerful. Third, I also check for generally perseverance and hard work, because that is a close to heart kind of trait for me, because I believe
that you hold dear.
That I hold dear. So if you're not willing to commit to your own learning, I mean, there is a fundamental problem, right? Because and we have come across people who say that if I have to acquire a skill, that is company's problem to kind of provide me into platforms and various kind of things. I mean, if you have to acquire a skill, you should be passionate about acquiring that skill anyhow. And whether working on a Sunday, you should not be required to only on Wednesday in office time, I will spend on learning, which has to be company sponsored. That guy is basically going to have a career death sooner or later. So that's, I think those are some of the things I really look for.
If you see in your mind, think of the 5 or 7 people who really scripted incredible success journeys at Moglix. People who've been with you, from year 1, year 2, last 3 years. Do you think all 4 of them share those values of self-awareness, high talent, hard work, and perseverance? So is that those 4 qualities that would make someone successful at Moglix for sure?
+1. I mean, we talk about fearlessness as one of the core values of Moglix. So I think
that's my favorite word. I think fearlessness.
So you will see that as the number 1 reflected. And now it is almost impossible to judge an interview. True. Much harder to judge in an interview. But it's something that we take very dear to. So people not being afraid to take risk, people not afraid to going the extra mile, people not afraid to failing. I mean, that doesn't mean you fail all the time, but you sort of are not afraid to fail, and taking bigger bets, so on and so forth, or solving hard problems, because we are all about, I mean, the way Moglix has been built is about solving hard problems, not solving the easy problems.
Yeah, excellent. So everyone, if you want to be successful at Moglix, enjoyed it. Fearlessness, talent, self-awareness, perseverance, and hard work. That's the Moglix superstar persona. I want to break for audience questions. I think we already answered one of the questions. I think Usha's from Talent Board, about should you hire for expertise or an all-rounder in the initial 6 months to 1 year, which is a kind of conversation we had about precise mapping to general. I'm guessing 6 months to 1 year would be basically somebody talented who could get things
more
done.
generalist is okay in the first seed stage, because you are also maneuvering, because you're not going to get to 99.9% perfection in the first 12 months or 24 months. So it is okay, and people will traverse and do multiple roles.
Okay, a couple of other questions that we take. I'll read out. Let me actually read out one by one. This is an interesting one because you mentioned senior leaders. Can you share some insights about informed calls which you made to improve the productivity of senior leaders? Because you did say that the productivity of senior leaders is paramount to the success of a scaling organization. How have you amped productivity for your senior leaders?
So I think there are a few things we do. So number one thing is obviously building people who can understand each other faster. I think that enables firstly to get more productivity done. Second thing that we have done is, I would say, we are slowly getting rid of entire PowerPoint mess. So we have gone to, and particularly it happened more in work from home, where you were not able to walk to people and speak to them and so on and so forth. I think we have gone to, and people were preparing presentations to articulate for a meeting and so on and so forth, right? So we said, like, basically that's just waste of time, because you're preparing towards a PPT which you present for 15 minutes somewhere or the other. So we have gone to handwritten notes being scanned and used in the meetings as the default way of communication. So that is our true whiteboard in a virtual world. And for most meetings where we feel that this doesn't mean that this PPT is going to be used 10 times, 20 times, 30 times. So the real reason you may create a PPT is when you are sort of going to use it multiple times. Otherwise, you should not be doing it at all. And third, I think we have a structured way of building a rhythm, which is, I think, operations 101 of how do you go about conducting your weeklies and conducting your management meetings and so on and so forth. So I would say these three tricks have seemed to have worked so far.
Okay, super. That was a good question from Ravi. Another question that's coming from Saurav Chatterjee of Stealth Startup. He's asking, do you prefer building a team from your known network, or would you cast the net wider? And has that changed over the last 5 years?
So firstly, I don't think you can build a team from your cast network if you are scaling and building it out, right? So I think that's just not a viable strategy to go about it. And for us, it is the same. I mean, like, we have gone about hiring and bringing people whom we know. We have gone out and hired people, and they have been successful leaders. So if we look at our successful leader list, I think 75 to 80% of them, maybe slightly lower. So 60% plus do not come from directly knowing me beforehand.
Understood. Wow, that's 75% of the senior leaders.
Or the senior leaders. Okay, so I mean, you always, I think, given in the hyper-connected world that we live in, you always know of people using the second hub, but having known directly is the parameter I'm using. So I think that number would be between 60 to 75%. This is probably reflective of how you can actually come in from any facet or any organization and be successful within the Moglix.
Yeah. Great. Another question from Kunal Ashok at Your Dost. I think this is an important one also. Maybe not so much for senior leaders, but certainly for middle management and more junior colleagues. How does one ensure quality during the high growth phase? As you know, there is a fire to hire quick, and when you want to hire quick and hire in large numbers, has quality suffer? Does it suffer? And what do you do?
So I would say, again, it's an organization philosophy. Okay, because different organizations I've seen around me and among some of the startup founder cohorts, I think organization has to choose. We are actually on a path where we believe we really incentivize people who perform well and stay longer. We have clearly sort of put ourselves out and said that Moglix, we want to create the best organization for people who perform and stay, and it will continue to multiply, accumulate over a period of time into creating phenomenal career paths for people. And when you are starting with that as your first and most important criteria, you would not get into zone of trying to short circuit and compromise anywhere. Yes, sometimes it may seem like an easy path to hire fast, but we are also conservative as an organization to fire. So if you combine the two principles together, we would at least be that we try and do our best effort to hire right, so that we don't have to fire person, and that person can remain and truly have a fantastic career trajectory within the organization.
Sure. So your 2x2 is high performance and long tenure, right? That's the perfect quadrant would be for high performance and intention of a long tenure.
Yes.
There are just so many questions coming, so I don't know how to move to the next one, but I will take one from this. And everyone who's putting it on the chat and not the Q&A, I will come to some of your questions also. But let me just finish with this theme, and then we'll go to another theme. There's an interesting question from oh God, this dropping out. I feel you, Namrata, people do drop out at the end. But I think this was a good philosophical question from Sharbul Shah. There's a general saying that hire people smarter than you. Do you agree with the statement? Was this true for you for your first hire? And at what stage of the startup do you feel that you're able to hire people smarter than you? And don't be unnecessarily modest. Be real, Rahul. Yes, everyone is smarter.
You want to answer for yourself, or you want me to answer?
Nobody is going to believe that yes, you think everyone is smarter than you. No.
So I think sometimes when we use this generic axioms, okay, versus theorems, or the thoughts why those statements were made, I think we just don't get the right answers, and we become confused. And I'm a general. Why did somebody coin this term that you should hire people smarter than you? I think probably he was thinking you need to hire people who are smarter than you across different functions. And that is what my hope. Have I hired a person who is smarter than me in finance? Absolutely yes. So I think the smartness is very much not a single absolute parameter, because when you're creating an organization, you're saying that, am I hiring the smartest person in HR? Am I hiring the smartest sales guy? Am I hiring the smartest business development guy, operations guy, customer success guy, finance guy, so on and so forth? So have I made sure that I've hired people smarter than me in the organization? The answer is absolutely yes, because they are smarter in those genre of things that we need to do as an organization to become successful. Now, and therefore this true benchmark of absolute smartness is a very academic thing.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. Did I answer that question?
No, I think you did. And actually, no, you did. And I think you're so right. I think as an entrepreneur, and I've experienced the last 2 years and tried to build her up, but it takes so much to build a company, and so many different skills, and so many different kinds of wisdom, right? It's almost impossible. And I'll tell you, I was a non-techie, non-MBA, so I was going into building a tech-enabled company with so much imposter syndrome about how I'll be able to do this. But then I realized, wow, if there's some things that come naturally to me, because there's no way that anyone coming from any educational background or degree will know everything that the company that you're trying to build has to have. So listen, just get the right people in place, and ensure that the company gets your best for sure. But then hire for the rest. So I think I totally agree with you. Last question on the fit, and then we'll quickly move into this whole art of motivation, retention, and growth, which actually a lot of the questions are about, and I'll take them. One very interesting question that's come from Saikat Ghosh is, do you hire for a culture fit? Because a truly inclusive culture would mean that somebody can thrive in a culture out of which they're an outsider, right? Like sometimes in being very authentic, we can stop diversity because we hire for a kind of culture fit that we are in a company.
So there are two things. We care a lot about few elements of value. And while I know most companies would create this sort of charts and other things and paste on walls, that's not how culture and companies are getting created. Okay. So when we talk about fearlessness, I mean, it reflects when we talk about trying to get the right people in the right roles and making them, getting them the right tools and growing fast, all of those things, right? So we care about those things, and we believe if you look at that sweet spot I've spoke about, I mean, people are going to stay longer and going to be high performance only when they are actually going to become better and better at it. So success of people inside Moglex is very important and dear to me. So, and which would mean there is social sort of elements or it, there is learnability elements, there is hard work elements, there is role related knowledge elements. And the culture, as in the broad term sounds, is a combination of some of these. Will they be able to thrive and excel within Moglex environment and the value system that we absolutely believe in? I think we do take cognizance of that a lot. And I think I'll give you a sort of one cheat sheet if you want. So if your last 5 years, the number of companies divided by number of years is less than 2, you'll be an interview reject.
Well, say, give me that maths again. So in the last 5 years, number of companies divided by?
Okay. So if you, let's say you had 5 years of experience, whatever, number of years of experience divided by number of companies.
By number of companies. And if it was the answer was less than 2, you're rejected. I've never heard that logic.
You're probably absolute rejected, even not interviewed.
Because that makes sense with your 2x2, but because you said high performance and intention or ability to persevere for a long tenure. I think that's a really interesting, and a lot of people are asking these questions about people not joining at the, you give the date of joining and people drop off. I think so prevalent in a certain kind of talent in the internet economy in India, certainly. I think a lot of those, maybe this check of Rahul's could help to figure out a little bit about perseverance and loyalty. I want to move to the next theme. So I think we did a lot about the sort of talent company fit right now. Let's talk about motivating and growing, truly growing employees. And I think there's just several questions on that. I do want to take as many questions from the audience. Wow. Okay, then somebody also wants to know how you felt when you met Mr. Ratan Tata, but we'll do that at the end. Okay. How do you plan appropriate growth of manpower in this hyper growth situation? You know, imagine you got someone, can you immediately know where you would like to see this person in 2 years or 3 years? And that you really chart, like for the high performance, at least senior people, how do you chart their hyper growth within your hyper growth construct?
See, we are very merit oriented as an organization. Okay. And I know many a times, and I've been on sort of whatever it seems like other side, right? Because people talk about employer-employee relationship, which I think is just bullshit. I mean, like we are all trying to build something together, and there is so much joy in that. But if you look at it, I think everyone's career trajectory, what they want to learn, is truly in their hands. So just having that approach or a mindset which says that somebody has to think about me is just a nonsensical construct. Maybe we learn it from our early days ki maa baap batayenge ki to somebody else is thinking for you. Like at some point you have to grow up, right? I mean, you have to think for yourself. You will have mentors around. When you have and if you are honest enough, straight enough, in the right conversations, ask them inputs, it will enable you to shape yourself and your learning and many of these things. And if you're learning, contributing, there is nobody who can stop you from growth. I can tell you that, at least in the Moglex context, I can tell you that. I know there are other undercurrents in various organizations, but we are trying to create an organization without those. So if you are learning, growing, ability to take more and more ownership, more and more responsibilities, you have no time constraint. There is definitely a time constraint in terms of consistency of being able to do X as well. Because we again, maybe somewhere stereotypical in our learning and this thing, we tend to exemplify somebody who sort of takes care of the fire situation. And I am a big disbeliever in that. I am true believer is maybe a little mathematical, but integrated contribution of a person over a period of time versus only the people who will perform 50x for 1 week and the rest of the 51 weeks they might be below par. I don't incentivize that behavior as an organization. I want to continue to have, and therefore hard work, persistence, continuous effort.
Consistency.
Consistency is important for us. I mean, and if you look at it over a period of time, all of these people actually beat the hell out of people who are only able to perform for 1 week out of 52.
Yeah, like spurts of greatness don't last, right?
It doesn't. At least in our system, it lasts less than a week. So it is fairly back to reality, back to what needs to be done.
Sure. Let me ask about incentives for how do you motivate, right? What incentives do you believe? And there are a couple of questions around that as well. That how do you manage your talent capital as against financial prudence, right? Or whatever money in the bank that you have for your payroll and for your talent. And I'm very interested to know what incentives do you believe people have really valued? Is money really everything? And if not, what are the other ones where for sure, and you have to map that for every person who you find critical, that listen, this one is about money, this one is status, this one is learnability, this one is autonomy. How do you map incentives to people?
So I think firstly it starts from core belief. I think you asked earlier the question that obviously organization gets the positives and negatives of what an entrepreneur believes in.
Okay.
So my belief of incentive and motivation actually starts differently. I believe the question is, when you get up during the day, are you excited about getting to office and doing what you do? Is that the first thing? Because you're not thinking of your paycheck when you go get up in the morning. If you are, probably anyways, there is another set of problems, but mostly that is. So the quality of work, the people whom you work with, the environment, I think is the first most important incentive. And I think combined with, are you mission driven? Are you more paycheck driven? All of those, and some of those get filtered out in our sort of process as well. What drives or motivates an individual? And I would think that for quite a few people, actually this starts to become the dominant force. And when it comes to compensation, I think for us, what we continue to believe in, we want to incentivize firstly very, very generously the long-term incentive, because that's the key element, because this is a more mission that we are on. It will take us 10 years or maybe more to transform the Indian manufacturing and infrastructure sector. So I think, and as we do that, how do people remain motivated about firstly what they are getting to do, the people they are going to do it with, and then are they going to be sufficiently incentivized monetarily over a period of time? And then I think you got to take care of the hygiene stuff. I mean, like, we are not living in our own bubble and people have choices and so on and so forth. We try to take care of those as well. But I would say that principally our way of thinking of motivation and other things and things we filter for, I mean, I would say self-selection to a certain extent helps as well, is for this way of thinking about the wholesome compensation and overall quality of work and what you like doing.
And long-term incentives. So you're incentivized to stay. So you're okay with people who will leave in 6-12 months because you'd rather that they go, because you'd rather than reward the people who've been there 3 years plus and whatever, right? So exponential benefits if you've been in the system longer.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. The specific question around manufacturing, because obviously that's the space that you're in and trying to transform. There's a question that there's a lot of hesitance in, might be in workforces there to adopt new technologies, new ways of system. Very few industries have, I think, been as disrupted in the way that they're working as manufacturing has been. Have you ever found, how do you incentivize people towards high growth and innovation, right? How do you push people, or do you think Moglix, because it is in that startup world, hasn't suffered that?
You mean for our customer set or for our
But I
employees?
guess the custom. So maybe I'll answer it from both lens. How do you in? I think this is in a way a more customer lens question, and we're having an HR question. So I don't know if you can answer both quickly.
So on customer side, see, eventually, yes, it's a slower moving industry vertical. Having said that, it is
Customer side.
Extremely core to the Indians, this thing, right? So, and many of these things, what happens is that the initial hard work is, or the hump is very, very high. But once you cross over the hump, I think you start to become that this is the new way of life. So I think for us versus many of the consumer startups, the initial hump was much higher for us than a consumer startup. But I think the reward of that is that once you cross that hump, people at least start to believe in the credibility, because people in this industry or on our customer side look for credibility, look for the time you have spent, look for the genuineness with which you are trying to solve the problem, and that has to be demonstrated over a period of time. So I think that's on the customer side, and therefore it becomes faster and faster over a period of time, the change. On the people side, I would say that I think if you're solving a technology problem in an old sector, I think people are okay with it. I mean, there are still, choices people would have, that somebody can be really passionate about education or healthcare or various other sectors. But I don't think early days, maybe we had a little bit of this challenge of how do you sort of do that. But I think as we have grown and the work environment and so on and so forth, one of the things, statistically, we are probably one of the highest women leadership in the organization for a manufacturing sector. So so those are some of the things which continue to enable more and more people to join the organization.
Okay. I think there's lots of questions also around this particular moment in time we find ourselves in, remote work from home, the pandemic, and I'll take a bunch of that later. The last one sort of staying from this theme, because this is one, most companies, in adopting a flat org structure, how do you show people career path beyond just sort of compensation additions? Because there is a certain set of people who do want that linearity or that feeling or external manifestation of a career path and growth, which comes from designations and hierarchies. So how do you think about that?
So I think maybe for whatever reason over the last 3, 4, 5 decades, I think we as a culture have gotten more acceptance towards that we should get a promotion 2-3 years, right? And therefore, a certain IT services companies or certain manufacturing companies would have invented designations just to make sure that it feels like you are progressing in life, right? Because that is a moment of celebration. You cut a cake with the family and they feel like, okay, now you're probably +1 and you beat the hell out of the second guy, right? Kind of a syndrome, right? We understand that social world is like that, right? But having said that, I think for the environment that we work with and what we continue to talk about as a culture philosophy is that life is not about, and when you are in group work, you have to shed off this myth that I succeed when I beat someone else. Versus really looking at how much can I do and am I getting to do more? So we define progress as more. Are you able to take more responsibilities? Are you able to do more? That's the key determinant. And you don't have to celebrate yourself based on whether I I went from 10th to 11th standard and that guy flunked that remain in 10th standard. There's this bullshit and life catches on. If you do it over a sustained period of time, I can tell you the smartest of guys can be defeated firstly if they do not do that. And I've seen that enough. I can say for IIT Kanpur 20 years finished that the smartest people at campus may or may not.
May not. Yeah, totally.
Because it's some integration of time. And similarly for people who went to other colleges as well. So So therefore, that is a true benchmark, and we are fairly, I would say, flat as an organization. And I think we have also realized that flat as an organization and flat as a designation may mean different things. So we are more flatter as an organization. We have found a mid path given the social conundrums that people may undergo through.
Of celebrating, and I think this is one of Indian education system's biggest sort of tragedies is we've never incentivized teamwork and collaboration, right? It's always been me and my
I think all education systems. I think we beat up our education system too much.
Of course. So that's also, you're right. All grade and individual grade given is that true of all formal education systems anyway. Let's focus a little bit about, as I said, this moment in time, right? And Vishali is asking, how has the pandemic affected the working style and how do you manage the same? And there's a follow-up question sort of around that from an Arnab Garg from Prodap to say, how do you scale any challenges in the last 15 months about scaling the business in a virtual environment? Because Moglix has grown considerably even in the last 15 months. And how do you foresee people managing permanent remote working? Which side of the remote working permanent are you on? Or what blend are you thinking? 2 days in at home, 3 days in office, 4-1, work from anywhere, I'll never have to see you again. Where are you and how have you managed?
Very, very complex question. We are learning, we are determining what is the right thing. And I don't think there is a perfect answer. I think it again determines based on what you need to do as an organization and what are the core beliefs of the organization and individuals, so on and so forth. So I want to put that caveat, so don't take it as and apply it across in your homes, in your offices.
Apply with caution.
Apply with caution if you were to go to your boss and ask for it. So one, I have always believed in joy of working with people. And I think therefore, which has an element of virtual, which has an element of physical world. So I will continue to, and maybe it's like, at least we have grown in that era where maybe the generation which my kids who are studying, they might believe in something else or would have found ways in which they will be equally able to build relations and do that. I mean, imagine when we grew up, I mean, like, how would you propose to a girl or date a girl? I mean, virtually, I mean, like, I don't even know have that skill or knowledge. So, and therefore, for me, the pleasure will always be about working with people in person as much as possible. Now, I mean, obviously, you don't have to have 100%. There is a right balance. The second thing is, I think as the pandemic started, we moved very, very early on over the last 1 year into what we call as multiple responsibility or stakeholders for us. So we think about everything that we've decided as an organization is about what can we do for customers, what can we do for people in the organization, what can we do for suppliers, what can we do for our manufacturing ecosystem, startup ecosystem, so on and so forth. So a lot of our philosophy and decision making now is towards what we can do best in each of these segments and therefore holistically provide a right combination of answers. We fall in a segment which is very unique. I can't take a credit saying that we are as frontline as a doctor, policeman, or so on and so forth. But we are into essential services for many of the things, whether it is oxygen, surgical mask, and many of those things, right? So if we were to happily say that let's shut down and to work from home and warehouses and supply chain are dependent on that, I mean, like, good luck. I mean, we will run out of food in our homes, run out of medicines in our houses, run out of masks, and all other shit will collapse, right? So
that's true.
Saying it, I think, is probably, I sometimes also find it offensive. Okay. And it will be weird on this platform to say that, because as people say that if you're not working from home or if the organization is not working from home, you're doing something wrong. Imagine your grocery store. I mean, like the Zomato delivery guy. I mean,
there's
like
so much inequity in that conversation, right?
Right. So what you're sort of demeaning the work of everyone. I mean, like the doctor can easily decide, yeah, many of them are rich enough. I mean, like, I mean, Dr. K.K. Agarwal, who passed away, I mean, like last week, and I was so sad, I didn't even knew him, right? I just watched his videos and things like that. I mean, he's like 62, right? So I think we have to be very, very cautious that there is a role and responsibility we play in our ecosystem, and we cannot shy away from that. If we all at this time optimize for individual, or we are so scared not to think about the broader picture, as we would think about for our families and society and country, I think we'll just get all wrong answers. At least I believe we are all wrong. We'll all get wrong answers.
I think that's true. I think your point of view is quite clear that personally you certainly enjoy being with people in the same space, and that doesn't have to be 9 to 8, 7 every day, Monday to Friday. I think some things will change. We've added a skill set about being able to work from anywhere, and that's a good one. But I think this one about a company like yours, which also has warehouses, whatever, the inequity even between employees, that you expect a certain staff or a workforce of the company to be out there when sort of all of the most highly paid and the executives can just be work from home. And I think this conversation, which we need to have much more as professionals as well as companies, is there's a moment in time that we are in India and its growth and what's happened in the last 15 months. I don't think we can have the kind of conversation each one of us has to commit to like working harder and persevering. I think I fully agree with that. With you. Okay, we just have 5 minutes left, and so there's still so much to talk about. So I'm just gonna quickly jump to talking about learning, and given that we're obviously very interested in that conversation at Harappa, and there's a question also, Risha, how do you really again motivate people to learn? Because the one thing that we hear from all our corporate learners, and when we go to pitch Harappa to enterprises, that nobody has the time to learn, right? Like professionals are also busy, don't have the time to learn. And that's a couple of questions that we got from the audience also. How do you tell people to learn? Because I know you said you believe in structured learning as a very important tool for people scaling themselves as professionals.
So I would say awareness is a very important thing. I mean, if people are not self-aware, it's almost like you cannot take the प्यासे को कुएं के पास जाना है ना, right? So if kuwa cannot come, or even if you get kuwa to come to you, you will still be blanked out, right? So you'll not learn, right? So I think that is very, very important. And I think I'll talk about, two things here. One, I have believed that there are 3 innate skills, and innate, if you are able to inculcate over the years of time, I talk about it a lot. I mean, I don't think I've been able to do enough justice even with my kids yet on this, but that speed of learning, I think, is one very important thing. And learnability, whatever you call it. The second one being grasping and grabbing analytical skills. And third is this entire social communication skills with people. Because if you look at it, if you know how to learn and how to learn fast, I think you will continue to, I mean, you're unstoppable in that sense, right?
I do.
If you're analytical, you'll be able to structure all of those, because otherwise you'll be bombarded with so much knowledge and you'll not be able to, what do I do with it, right? So,
unconnected.
So you cannot. And third thing is, eventually you are not an individual, just you're working in a hyper connected world, learning as well as working with people to produce something of much higher order. So I think these 3 you need to. And I think many a times people beat up education. I think that is also lack of awareness. Because education is not meant to, education's first principle is igniting learning of how to learn and how to think about certain problems. Now, it doesn't mean that you say that they have not taught me how to think about this problem that I encountered in my work life, right? I mean, they were trying to teach you how to learn.
Yes.
And to how to apply some of those frameworks and structures into newer problems that you will find in the professional, personal life, so on and so forth. So I think, and therefore the inability as a student to apply those frameworks, we blame it back to the education system. But it's actually not, because I know for sure I have applied most of the constructs that I learned at ISB and IITK. So I'm a proud student, and I would love to go back and continue to learn. And I think I start to have liberty that now I choose that after 8 years, I chose that I want to go and learn what the hell is marketing, or what the hell is sort of structured thinking on organization development, or on strategy and various topics. And now I want to learn about macroeconomics and psychology of people, which is something I never imagined at 18 that I would be so interested in to learn. So,
and it's so useful to have as a
but
knowledge
it is
body.
very, very interesting to learn, and learning doesn't only mean, I mean, I'm a learner from people, so which is probably the first thing. Sometimes we are closed enough not to learn from people around, but every
That's true.
conversation and learning, you're actually grabbing something out.
That's true. No, learning from others. I think the point you made about almost these meta skills that you learn how to apply in the real world is really the point of education, for sure, right? And that application is really last question, and actually second last. There's one question about your own particular journey, and then we'll end with that. Last question on a theme, really is how happy are you? And again, be honest about the learning quotient at Moglex. Is it when you see, how many employees do you have, and what percentage are you happy that you think they're following the principles that you spoke about?
So
on learning.
So we are close to 1,100 people.
Wow.
Okay. And across the country and in a few markets internationally. The interesting thing about, again, philosophy for me is it's not something you can thrust upon people. And I think it's probably not even appropriate for me to start judging people around it, because they will have their own career journey. They will have their own journey within Moglex. And so be it. I will continue to provide them the environment. I'll continue to nudge them. If required, push them towards it. But it will be up to them, because I cannot measure myself on how much people are learning, because it is for them to learn. And I think once I start to do, I start to sound like a principal or somebody who has to meet some KRA on this guy has learned Java 2.0. I mean, like, I don't benchmark myself. I continue to try and ignite people. And I think that's the best you can do as a leader.
Okay. Last question from the audience. This is Vishali. What has been the biggest challenge in the last 5 years? And we'll end with that.
I think I feel actually fortunate. I don't think we have a really big challenge, which I consider as a big challenge. I mean, there are a lot of challenges. I mean, you have to teach a customer, why does it make sense to transact online? What does he do if he calls someone on phone? What is the advantage of catalog buying? What is the advantage of centralization? What is the value of finance? And all kinds of things. But I somehow feel that I don't think we have encountered a challenge big enough that we cannot deal with it. And
it's in the right zone of creative tension, that challenges which are tough enough that you want to solve them, but not so tough that they paralyze you.
Yeah. So the only thing I would say is that, can we do faster is the biggest thing that we continue to challenge ourselves on. And could we have done last 5 years faster? I believe yes.
Wow.
Now,
only you can believe so. But thank you so much, Rahul. With 3 minutes overtime, thank you so much for such a fun chat, and thank you to the audience which asked so many questions. Thank you for logging into Thrive Talks. We hope to again see you back again next week. Okay. Thanks, Rahul. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too. Bye bye.